Hello, my name is Liz Waterhouse and I'm a spokesperson for Reclaim the Night in Perth, Australia. Reclaim the Night, or Take Back the Night, is a movement which has been running annual marches around the world since 1977 to highlight issues of women's safety and male violence against women. I was to deliver a speech on behalf of Reclaim the Night at the March for Justice event on Sunday, 14 March 2021. However, we were deplatformed a week prior to the event without explanation. The deplatforming of a Reclaim the Night speaker has presented a double bind for us as feminists. On the one hand, we understand that different women approach feminist struggles differently, and we acknowledge and support the persistence and resistance of all women in whatever form it takes. On the other hand, we need to say that as proponents of an important long-term feminist initiative, we are troubled by the fact that we have been silenced in a context where, ironically, the issue at hand is about the patriarchal trend of silencing women. We are particularly despondent because we know how important it is that we work together if we want change. You say enough, and we, the Reclaim the Night Perth collective, could not agree more. Please let us all be allies and not be divided. This is so very important as we unite in the struggle against the same injustices. That this has occurred, focus is drawn to some very important issues regarding social justice organising and in particular women's rights organising. A sad irony is observable here. March for Justice, a gathering to fight for change for women, implicitly acknowledges that the silence of females is at the heart of sex-based oppression. It is by rendering us voiceless that our subservience is maintained. Yet what has happened in the organising of this protest is that the voice of a long tradition of feminist organising has been silenced. Reclaim the Night has been campaigning for women's safety for 44 years around the world, year in and year out. Yet organisers of March for Justice have seen fit to exclude Perth organisers from speaking at a protest essentially about women's safety. May I make it very clear now that the rumours leading to Reclaim the Night being deplatformed are completely unfounded. We are disappointed that feminists have cancelled other feminists in what would seem an increasingly censorious culture in the left. In part, this video is a response to the slander being circulated about Reclaim the Night Perth by a March for Justice leader and an explanation of what has happened. Most importantly, following that, I will talk about the significant implications for women's rights organising more broadly. I ask you to consider the meaning and implications of what has happened here deeply. Thank you for listening. So, here's our account of what has occurred. In early March 2021, when women's marches were announced following recent appalling demonstrations of rape culture, misogyny and the silencing of women in the Australian Parliament by parliamentarians, Reclaim the Night collective members were excited. We have long hoped for a popular rise in women's organising, given how much change is still needed in Australia in terms of the rights, protections, status and well-being of women and girls. However, our enthusiasm began to dim as reports of bullying, silencing and the removal of women from the March for Justice groups came to our notice. All instances involved women questioning aspects of the organising or expressing opinions divergent from other members. For example, there was division on whether the word woman should be included in the march title. By this juncture, Reclaim the Night had already agreed to give a speech at the Perth event, and we were focusing on supporting the local organising group, however possible. On March 5, we were surprised to see a post in the March for Justice Perth Facebook group about rally speakers that did not include a Reclaim the Night spokesperson. Seemingly, we had been unceremoniously deplatformed. No discussion, not even the etiquette of being notified. We soon became aware of allegations of transphobia levelled at Reclaim the Night Perth in the group by a local woman unconnected with the event. Apparently, the allegation had been disputed by local women who had been involved in the previous Reclaim the Night events as participants and organisers. Let me be very clear about the history of Reclaim the Night Perth's attendance policy. The Reclaim the Night event policy states, and has stated for many years, that we understand that people can have a complex relationship to sex and gender, leaving it up to attendees to decide whether it is appropriate for them to attend the women's only event. As noted publicly through the policy and repeatedly online, we are not in the business of policing trans and gender diverse people, respecting the capacity of people to assess the appropriateness of their attendance. Here is the Reclaim the Night policy as clearly stated on our website. Are trans and non-binary people welcome? We recognise that trans people face discrimination and male violence. We aren't offering a definition of womanhood or telling individuals how to feel about themselves or what to conform to. We trust individuals to decide for themselves if they attend, recognising not all will strictly identify as women. People can have a complex relationship to sex and gender. Reclaim the Night Perth does not have an interest in policing trans or non-binary individuals. Notably, there have been no incidents in relation to trans-identified or gender-diverse people attending Reclaim the Night rallies in Perth, and we are committed to working to keep this the case. In 2019, during my Reclaim the Night speech about women killed by male violence, I listed trans woman Melody Bruno. This is evidenced by the video of the speech available on our Facebook page and the transcript available on our website. Reclaim the Night has had a consistently inclusive policy, and we were enthusiastically and positively engaged with the March for Justice Organising Committee in Perth. However, we were excluded without explanation or notice. Furthermore, we were subsequently unable to clarify with the March for Justice local lead organiser whether transphobia allegations were indeed the reason for our deplatforming. We were offered no right of reply, whereby we may have set the record straight in relation to Reclaim the Night Perth's attendance policy, despite being on good terms with the local lead organiser and expressing our full support. Seemingly, we were guilty without trial. In the lead up to the march, we became aware of a post thread by National March for Justice admin Sarah Alice Allcroft talking about how to respond to counter-protests. We were alarmed that there appeared to be confusion between Reclaim the Night Perth and Reclaim Australia, a white supremacist organisation. The thread had been closed by the admin, hence we were unable to defend our group's reputation by disputing this outrageous claim. We had asked local Perth March for Justice organisers to address the issue, and they agreed, but the post was not opened for our input and no correction was made. March for Justice organisers knowingly gave power to defamatory accusations about Reclaim the Night, a long-standing feminist campaign working against violence against women. We continue to support the March for Justice movement and do not assume that all organisers were aware of the situation. However, what were we to make of this? In our opinion, this had the potential to endanger women at the local march who could be mistaken for counter-protesters, hostile counter-protesters, and treated as such. Having failed to receive any meaningful response through private channels, we posted a statement on the Reclaim the Night Facebook page in which we communicated that we had been deplatformed by March for Justice without a stated reason. We also communicated that the March for Justice Organising Committee would not clarify that Reclaim the Night Perth had no ties whatsoever to the white supremacist group Reclaim Australia. We also contacted Perth March for Justice organisers with whom we remain on good terms and who we continue to support, to advise that we had made the statement, to express that we were keen to resolve the issues, and to advise of our intention to attend the rally in solidarity. We remained committed to our values of working across the feminist community, and we communicated that imperative clearly. What has happened since the march was organised is most concerning. We were made aware that trans woman Sarah Alice Allcroft, the March for Justice group admin, had tweeted the following about Reclaim the Night Perth. In regards to Reclaim the Night Perth being deplatformed by March for Justice, it wasn't because they are white supremacists or connected to Reclaim Australia, although there are tight links between WS and anti-trans groups. It was purely because of A, their refusal to remove TERF comments from the Perth M4J group, given the policy of M4J has been explicitly inclusive, and B, their disgusting treatment of one of the M4J admins when asked in a respectful manner to take down the comments. You don't try to hijack something and then try to use it to beat down on some of the most vulnerable in the group. What is most bemusing about this is that I had only, in fact, made one single comment in the March for Justice Perth group ever, and it was in response to a comment about wearing T-shirts with feminist campaign slogans. This highly inflammatory comment was, in its entirety, this. Wendy, great point. How this could possibly be perceived as a politically contentious comment remains a mystery. How could the comment be, in anyone's wildest imaginings, interpreted as disgusting is also beyond me. Yet, Sarah Alice had somehow made such an interpretation. If it was such that they had assumed some other commenter was a Reclaim the Night Perth organiser, they did so without checking facts. If I may address the charge of my disgusting treatment of the Perth March for Justice admins, also alleged by Sarah Alice, the only organiser I had in fact been in contact with, I remain on good terms with, this person hugged me at the end of the march. We had hoped that upon realising that the information was incorrect, the admin would withdraw the inaccurate information. However, it became evident that factual accuracy may not have been the key decision-making factor for Sarah Alice. When challenged by feminists on a public Facebook post about the deplatforming of Reclaim the Night Perth, Sarah Alice responded by repeating the wildly inaccurate allegations about our behaviour, comparing Reclaim the Night Perth to an extremist group who parades hatred under the banner of freedom of speech. Furthermore, the comment suggested that our deplatforming was justified because content posted a week after the decision was made by people not in Reclaim the Night contravened the March for Justice rules. I just think it's funny that a bunch of TERFs went into a group that was trans-inclusive, got to admin, then pitched a fit when they were called out on it because their refusal to take down posts was harming support from serious backers. Personally, I had no idea who they were or what group they were a part of until after they'd refused to acknowledge the issues surrounding their involvement with a group that was explicitly inclusive. Liz might be a wonderful person, but allowing shitty commentary about people and then crying foul about it because you get deplatformed for it is the same thing we see in Republicans, Quanons, and any other extremist group who parades hatred under the banner of free speech. What part of read the rules don't people understand? Lastly, I was brought in to make sure turfery wasn't being posted in the M4J group. Mission accomplished. None of these allegations about our conduct are correct. None. In response to the ongoing smear, I finally responded with a summary of the situation, clarifying that the reference behaviour was not that of any Reclaim the Night organisers, and again pointing out that our attendance policy is trans-inclusive, and reiterating that, on principle, we do not censor the voices of women on our page, even the ones we most disagree with. Sarah Alice, I have no idea whose behaviour in the M4J group you are referring to, but it most certainly wasn't mine, and no other RTN Perth woman was in the group. I'm not sure why you think repeating this inaccurate statement is appropriate feminist behaviour. Perhaps checking your sources would be advisable. In relation to comments on the post about being deplatformed, we unleashed nothing. We calmly stated facts, including our long-standing attendance policy. Given we were raising concerns about being silenced, it would be hypocritical to censor comments on the post, even the ones we disagreed with, and there were plenty. On that basis, we have added to, not subtracted from, the conversation. We understand that people across the political spectrum may disagree with us on various points, specifically our focus on male pattern violence, our women-centred focus, and our inclusive attendance policy. Debate on the internet about these points is one thing, but we request that everyone respects our intent at the event, and to date, events have been without incident, as we would wish. The bullying of women on the page is of significant concern, however, especially given Reclaim the Night's focus on campaigning for the well-being of women. Sarah Ellis's snide and dismissive response addressed none of our points, demonstrating a deliberate disregard for facts and fairness. Liz Waterhouse, there's no eye-roll reaction. Maybe bring this up with name redacted. Despite this entirely unconciliatory response, I again attempted reasoning with Sarah Ellis. Sarah Ellis Allcroft, to clarify, are you suggesting that a feminist group should be deplatformed because of something someone not in the organising group said on the internet after the deplatforming occurred? My question received no reply. It is deeply concerning that such slander has been deliberately and repeatedly circulated by a key organiser and Facebook group admin of the National March for Justice movement. It's more concerning still that some of the other March for Justice admins, local or national, must have at some point become aware of the lies being spread about well-intentioned attendees and women's rights organisers. We reiterate our intention to support the March for Justice movement, and we look forward to resolving this issue with organisers, who we still trust to be well-intentioned and working for the women and girls of Australia. However, onwards in the story, it was not just Reclaim the Night who were affected by the dismissive, disrespectful and censorial approach acted out by Sarah Ellis. In the days following the march, comments of many women in the March for Justice Facebook group were deleted. Any comment that appeared to ask the group to be accountable for its actions was immediately deleted and the commenter blocked. Here are two comments posted March 16 that have come to my attention. They're gender-critical, rational voices, as there are many issues gender ideology raises to be sorted out, not TERFs and not anti-trans. They should be listened to and at the least not excluded, as they are women. That's what this is all about. Women. All women. Sure, but this isn't the place to do it. It's always been an inclusive space, and you don't have an inclusive space when you're debating someone's right to exist. Inclusion doesn't mean being a TERF doormat. Another woman replied to that comment. Yes, you make some good points. How can we talk about inclusivity and all women when some women are being excluded because of having slightly different views? There are instances where this has happened, where wrongthink is not even actual but simply suspected. This state of affairs invokes the memory of the German Stasi. The event is trans-inclusive, so there's no worries about that. The people being excluded are cis women. It has also been said that women's comments will be deleted if they don't perfectly align with that of the admin, and the admin is also commanding what can be said, when, and where. That sounds very much like censorship and controlling and silencing women, which is ironic because this whole thing is about demanding that women not be silenced. Denying anybody's right to exist, that is hyperbolic nonsense. Women are asking not to be excluded from the conversation about women's rights. Pretty reasonable, yet they are being excluded. There's some seriously inconsistent backwards talk going on here. the majority of participants in this action will not be aware that women, including some very experienced feminist organisers, are being told to shut up and excluded from organising groups and being deplatformed. This is cause for alarm, and we all need to take pause and think more deeply about what's going on here. This comment was also deleted, and the commenter immediately blocked. These comments would seem pretty reasonable and neither say anything about excluding trans women. Both comments are, in fact, talking about the exclusion of other women. However, both of these comments were immediately deleted and the people who posted them were blocked. Many other women experienced upset and distress when the same thing happened to them. The admin referenced group rules as a justification for silencing these women, but how exactly do either of these comments contravene the rules? We can only imagine that Rule 2 was referenced. March for Justice, Group Rules, Rule 2, no hate speech or bullying. Make sure everyone feels safe. Bullying of any kind isn't allowed, and degrading comments about things like race, religion, culture, sexual orientation, gender or identity will not be tolerated. While we support the principle of safe and respectful engagement, we question how this rule could be interpreted to justify the silencing of numerous feminists. Surely, disagreement should not be conflated with bullying. It would appear that the silencing and exclusion of women was more about shutting down inconvenient questions and perhaps in line with the personal biases of the admin. It seems to us that the actions of the admin were in fact contraventions of the same rule. The retrospective justification of the deplatforming of feminists and the highly censorious approach to debate within the March for Justice groups indicates a deep disconnect from the work to resolve women's real-world problems. Despite the location of the debate, this is not a silly internet spat. The blocking of the voices of ongoing campaigners for women and girls cannot help the collective movement which we all seek to contribute to in our own small ways. More importantly, though, than the omission of Reclaim the Night Perth's voice from the Perth March for Justice, is that these behaviours actively discourage other women from engaging in feminist organising. This conduct is incompatible with a broader understanding of inclusivity and true intersectionality. The overarching question that screams for an answer is why are women's voices being silenced, particularly in a context of a campaign about not silencing women? These behaviours have given many people cause to doubt the integrity of the organisation because they appear to demonstrate blatant hypocrisy. Let's be very clear about what has happened here. Trans women have not been excluded from attendance at Reclaim the Night Perth or March for Justice, and neither has Reclaim the Night advocated for this exclusion. The people who have in fact been excluded are biological women, many of whom are long-term feminist organisers, and they were seemingly excluded in the name of inclusivity. I am particularly irked by the censorship of the many women around this campaign because I am painfully aware how many women come to the movement because of deep personal trauma associated with sex-based oppression. How will our movement make meaningful change if we permit the bullying, defamation and silencing of women within groups ostensibly set up to work towards ending the bullying and silencing of women? Let the ironies here not be lost on all who take interest in women's rights issues. What is observable is that despite what we still believe to be the good intentions of most of the March for Justice organisers, the organisation has, in one way or another, enabled an individual who appears ruthless in their bullying and silencing of women for perceived or actual differences of opinion, however slight. It may be that more than one admin was responsible for removing comments and blocking group participation, but we have only experienced slander at the hands of one person, and we can only speak to the facts that we observe. We do not claim that this one person represents the entire movement or any one demographic, merely that the behaviour itself was was damaging to women and the March for Justice movement, and that the March for Justice movement appears not to have acted to protect women or itself. What has been demonstrated here also is that outliers like this do not operate from a liberal values-based platform, but from an unscrupulous, sensorial, ideological, means-to-an-end, tactical basis, alarmingly similar to the patriarchal elements they purport to stand against. So, let us take pause to think about women's rights organising more broadly. What concerns about our movement do recent events raise? Here are some questions that came to us. By what principles and values should women's rights organising groups be operating? What sorts of strategies are most effective for building a healthy, sustainable movement? How do we best engage women who join our groups? How do we remain inclusive by embracing diversity of opinion? How do we work cooperatively with sister groups who may have different remits? How do we positively engage with the broader community? What checks and balances do our groups need to mitigate rogue behaviours? And how do we garner and maintain the community's faith in our integrity? Here are some thoughts we have about these considerations in light of recent events. Inclusivity. In order to reach women across society, to mobilise the grassroots movement that we need, obviously we need to be accessible. This requires us to be inclusive of a range of perspectives and to work together towards developing an optimal understanding of the female condition. We know that the most marginalised women have the fewest platforms to be heard. So many women are busy just trying to survive. How are they going to engage with the movement if organisers only permit those perfectly aligned with their own ideological framing? How very disingenuous will our movement be if we exclude women who experience the most sex-based oppression and have the most to say? We contend that we cannot achieve a better world for women by threatening and silencing those whom we might disagree with. Saying that some women's voices are to be heard and not others can only divide us and serve to maintain a culture in which sexism is entrenched. We must allow for a scope of opinion and continue to engage in open and respectful dialogue with other women without exclusion. It is essential to the organised struggle that we unite across real or perceived social and ideological divides to work for the well-being of women and girls. We simply cannot allow the movement to be weakened by derailment and division. People who are divisive, aggressive or sensorial in their approach to organising harm individual women, and they also harm the entire movement. Such people, behaviours and attitudes discredit us terribly and affect our capacity to effect meaningful change. As campaigners, we need to consider how to address these rogue elements for the sustainability of our groups, for the well-being of organisers and participants, and for the reputation and health of the movement itself. It is imperative that we do not allow such degradation of the feminist movement to occur. Avoiding derailment. What this episode perhaps teaches us is that we need to resist ideological derailment because we run the risk of losing focus and having our organising groups disintegrate. By allowing toxic scenarios to manifest, we cause harm to women, many of whom are already traumatised and struggling, and dissuade them from remaining active and engaged. Let us be mindful that we are working to improve the situation for women and girls in a world which is deeply hostile to many of the changes we are fighting for. If we indulge in endless bickering and splintering, we run the risk of losing all momentum and the capacity to advocate for change. Let's keep our eyes firmly fixed on what it is we campaign for. Values. Let us adhere to genuinely thoughtful values in every aspect of our organising and personal conduct. Honesty, respect, rigour, openness, and sincere engagement. Let's remember all of those for whom we fight, those who are less able to defend themselves. Let's always be conscious of the fact that many of the women involved in feminist organising have been significantly impacted by trauma. Let us commit to having robust conversations with the intention of ever expanding our knowledge and empathy for women's experience. Let's resist the base urge to express hostility towards, silence, or exclude those with whom we may not entirely agree. We need to centre women with an understanding of the other axes on which women are oppressed or marginalised, including, but not only, race, class and disability. We need to be thoughtful about how to best engage with the rest of society. We need to think strategically about how we can be heard in order to reach others. We need to consider carefully our mode of engagement. We need to command respect while treating others with respect. We should approach feminist issues with the rigour that they deserve. We should be engaging in fact-based conversations. We should seek to understand the scope of perspectives that exist in current debates. We should be accountable to each other in our organising groups and to women more broadly. We need to be real about the discipline that organising requires, the hard work, the intellectual rigour, the emotional effort, and the commitment to values and moral decency. These are the ideas that we have reflected on and the lessons that we have learnt or consolidated over the course of the past few weeks. It is our sincerest hope that March for Justice as a campaign continues to be as effective and successful as possible. To that end, we hope that organisers learn the lessons of recent weeks. We would be encouraged if they chose to seek to repair the damage done to the reputation of their organisation, to sister organisations, and to individual women who have engaged with the group in good faith only to be silenced. Going forward, I hope the movement can find healthy and effective ways of uniting women in the struggle towards the best outcomes for women and girls of the world. Again, I ask you to consider for yourself the meaning and implications of what has happened here deeply. Thank you for listening. In solidarity, Liz Waterhouse for Reclaim the Night Perth Collective.